Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist, and I'm joined by
Kerry Clack, columnist, editorial board.
Nancy Pryor-Johnson, associate editorial board editor.
Metro editor Greg Jefferson.
And you all have no idea how long it took us to get that intro done, but I think we're rolling now. And this is our Thanksgiving week edition of the podcast. And we're really thankful to have a special guest today, second-term councilwoman Melissa Cabello Havrda, whose district, I guess it's you described as kind of more or less rooted in the far west side. I mean, it's a really big district. And you're an attorney, you have an MBA, and we're going to talk about your time on the council and what your plans are. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and talk with you all today.
I wanted to start off by talking about something that's you all have been dealing with recently, and I would imagine this has been an uncomfortable situation because the idea of members of the council having to police your colleagues is not something that anybody signed up for, I'm sure. But in the past 2 weeks, you've had censure votes. First for Mario Bravo, who there was an incident in September in which he kind of verbally, I guess, berated is maybe the most apt term, a fellow council member, Ana Sandoval. And then last week, you all had a censure vote regarding Clayton Perry, who was involved in a hit and run accident. I guess I would just ask you, I know that it could not have been an easy situation for you or for any of the other council members in evaluating how you were going to approach it, what vote you were going to take. What was your thought process?
Well, first I want to say I really do respect all my colleagues. This is a very difficult gig we have, and putting your name on a ballot and doing this work is incredibly difficult. When I first learned of Mario, with the incident with Mario and Ana, of course, the first thing I think is what really happened. I was on the dais that day. I didn't see any of this actually happen. So, all the investigation and the facts that we learned afterwards really was what helped me to understand what I needed to do. But before all of that, I started to kind of soul search and think, what is my role here? What should I be doing? What was I elected to do? It wasn't this, or at least it wasn't what anybody intended. When I was sworn in as an attorney, I recall that there was a gentleman that was speaking that said, you are no longer a regular citizen. You're held to a higher standard. You don't get to say that you don't understand things. You don't get to make mistakes. And I took that with me to City Hall. And it's even more so because I had about 150,000 people putting their trust in me. And I think that what happened with my colleagues, both District 1 and District 10, it was a betrayal of that trust. And so that I do represent my community in that way. And it was really heartbreaking for me to see both of those incidents occur. Again, I do really respect and my colleagues, but it was heartbreaking because the community now sees city council as these people that maybe they can't trust, and so we have to work really hard there was already distrust in government, obviously, but we have to work harder now as a team, as colleagues, as a body to get over that trust. But when I'm faced with these censures, after seeing with Mario, of course, there was an investigation and we had some time and I had to think about it. And I talked with Mario.
That's kind of a workplace issue too. I think that was unique.
That was what the difference was for me for both of them, is what happened with Mario and Ana happened, for lack of a better term, at work, right? It happened at our place of business and to each other, to colleagues. So I think that was not an easy decision that we made, but I think it was a necessary decision. And I think that both Mario and Ana have taken steps moving forward. I think that they're working together and we're figuring that out. Now with Clayton, that's a little different because it didn't happen at work. At the same time, we have a pretty bad DW, drinking and driving, DUI issue in our city. And it's again going back to, we are the example. We're not allowed to make those mistakes. And not to downplay, not that they're just mistakes, but we have to be held to that higher standard. And so when I went on the dais, which was very quick, I think it was within a week's time, a little over a week, that we voted to censure Clayton, that was a little more soul searching for me because it was such a big issue and it's pervasive in our city. And, but also, it was kind of difficult for me because it's like I have to be judge and jury over a person that it didn't happen around me. It didn't happen in my work. At the same time, trust was put in me to look at this. So what I said on the dais is something I still very much believe today is, my faith doesn't allow me to deny a man forgiveness when he's asking for it, but my loyalty and service to this city doesn't allow me to just let this go. So I think they both had to be censured. Now, I did stop short of calling for his resignation. I think that's up to his constituents.
If you had been mayor, would you have been inclined to maybe take a little bit more time before the vote on Clayton Perry? Because everything happened really quickly. I think the vote was like 8 days after the incident, and there's still things we're finding out about it.
Absolutely, I think I would have taken a little more time. With Mario, it was a couple months, and we were able to think about it and see any evidence and talk about it with attorneys. And I feel more confident right now about that decision than I do about the one with Clayton because I didn't have that time to really. Internalize what was happening and the effects. And I've read a lot of articles. I've read from even comments from the community that thinking like if I had more time, maybe I would have considered that. Maybe I would have made a different decision. I don't think so, but yeah, time is helpful when you're trying to make a really big decision like that.
Did the video make it hard? Not to though.
Well, so the video, it was really hard to see that, not just because he's a colleague that I respect, but, he's an older gentleman and seeing kind of an older gentleman a military veteran like that on the ground, I was just like, it hurt. Like it hurt to see, a friend like that. And that goes for any of my colleagues. I hope I never have to see any of them in a situation like that. But because he's older and you just want to kind of help that person, it was hard for me to see that. But then you see the second part of it where he's, kind of defiant. And that was a little, it's hard. It's hard to weigh those two things.
Did you have any questions or concerns about SAPD's handling of it that night? I think a lot of people wonder, why wasn't he cited that night?
I didn't, but I happen to, I'm an attorney. I happen to have practiced on the misdemeanor criminal wheel for a while. And so being an attorney and knowing kind of why they didn't do a breathalyzer there, they don't have field breathalyzer tests. He wasn't behind the wheel. There's a lot of people would think that maybe some of these players are hiding behind these legal issues, but they're real legal issues. I think, I do think that there's an avenue where the officer could have arrested that evening, and maybe that's where the discretion part comes in. And so I don't discount, what people are saying about, well, if this had been a person of color, I don't discount that at all. Right. I don't think that the officer made mistakes that night, though.
What was the avenue? Under what circumstance could he have cited him?
Well, he could have arrested him that night. Right. He didn't have, I think with not to second guess the officer, but I think what he did was make the choice that this person is no longer a danger. He's going to go inside. I'm not going to arrest him tonight. Let's do the investigation and figure it out. And I think that was perfect. Well within his purview. I also think he could have arrested and made the decision to arrest, but I'm not going to second guess his decision in that moment. But I don't think it's wrong for people to call out, what would have happened. I don't like to live in hypotheticals. Let me be clear, but we have to face that issue that if he was a person of color from a different side of town. From inner city, what would that difference be? I don't know. I like to think that same officer would make the same decision. I don't know that. But I don't think he did anything wrong. I don't think he did. He took there were no legal missteps that he took in procedures too.
Have you all been briefed by San Antonio police or received any memos, or can you talk about that?
No, we haven't received any briefings from SAPD. No. Okay.
You all are going to have to appoint an interim replacement for Councilwoman Perry, who's asked for a sabbatical, and this is a unique situation. It's come up a couple of times in recent memory where someone's going to be gone for a couple of months or maybe less than that, and finding someone, making sure that people are represented, but at the same time, it's this is someone who's going to be serving for a very short time.
Yeah.
What are you looking at if you look at the criteria for that person?
Well, the applications I think are still open, so I don't know all of who. I have some ideas. I do right now. I'll say that I'm I know that Gallagher is applying, and there is a tendency right now for me to lean towards him just because he has been elected by District 10 before, right? They made that choice, and that choice at one point was him. Also, the fact that he's saying he's not going to run, that makes a big difference to me.
Takes the politics out of it.
It does, yeah. And I'm not even sure if he can. I don't know if he's termed out or not, but he's not termed out, so he could. Not. Well, I mean, we'll just have to take people at their word for things, because that doesn't always happen, Yeah. But I believe, I have to make a decision based on right now the facts that I know, not too much hypothetical or speculation, right? But I also say, having said that, I don't know who else is going to apply. I mean, that's the only one I know of right now. I do appreciate the fact that the people at one point have chosen him in that district, and it's important. That's historically a conservative district, and there are districts that are historically more progressive. I think it's very important to have that political spectrum, that conversation. So we have to consider that as well.
Now, your district is has been an incredibly fast-growing district. I mean, it was. That's where I was going with that. But when we had the redistricting process last year, I mean, I think it was the third biggest in terms of population, and the only other. Was
I think it was second. Yeah.
And so, I mean, right there with 8 and 9. And so I'm sure this is a district you grew up in. I'm sure that it's changed a lot. And a lot of positive has come with that. But I wonder if, what are the challenges you're looking at? I'm sure mobility is just a big one.
Absolutely. So I'm grateful. I have a couple of chairmanships on our committees, but one of them is transportation. I'm a chair-elect, on MPO as well. Transportation has to be one of my priorities. With a district growing as fast as ours is. And if you think about it, not just our district, we are just inside Helotes, just inside most of Alamo Ranch. So even the growth that's happening outside my district, when you're leaving downtown and you're going to Alamo Ranch, going to Helotes, you're going through District 6. Sure. So I have to prioritize transportation. And I love my district. I love going out. I know these neighborhoods. I know this city really well. I knock on doors. I listen. I understand. But I love to act. My favorite part of this is getting it done. So with transportation, that's a little bit, it's like trudging through mud, right? Because it's a lot of dollars. We're talking highways. We're talking surface roads. We're talking sidewalks. And I think at some point we have to get more creative. And I know there's been a long push for pedestrian and bike mobility, but I don't think the city has taken it seriously enough. I've spent some time recently in Colombia and in Mexico City, and they have these incredible bike lanes they're pretty much a whole road. I mean, a whole lane where a car could go, but they're being used and sometimes more than the vehicles, right? So we have to start looking more progressively at those things. I think that, and I'm guilty of it too. We're still sometimes a little small San Antonio, but we're not. We're the 7th largest city in the country, and we're growing, especially in my district. So not just getting creative about solutions, but really implementing it and putting our money where our mouth is, which is why I'm grateful to be on MPO. I'm grateful to be our chair of our transportation, because I have more say over those things. And not just for my district. It's really my city, right? We don't live in this little bubble in District 6. I mean, the roads go in and out. Gulevra Road is the main road I've been looking at. It goes from District 1 all the way out past, turns into 471, as a matter of fact. So and it's a treacherous road. So that's one of my priorities, not just because it goes through my district, but it goes through so many parts of the city, and it's just one of the main arteries. So I'm really pushing hard for bike and pedestrian mobility, getting people moved around our city. VIA, of course, we have to invest more in VIA. As I said, I was in Mexico City and Colombia recently, and I see their bus systems and think, why aren't we doing this, right? Why aren't we investing more in this and having these different avenues of mobility? Because we can't, and I love my car, don't get me wrong, I love driving, but it's nice to be able to be on a bus working and get my work done on the way to City Hall. I can't do that right now because I live kind of far out, and it would take a couple hours to get downtown, and nobody has that time. So when I say creative, it's not just it really is the funding. It's the ideas are there. I didn't make any of this, bring anything new to the table, but it's the funding I'm trying to push to the table.
When you look at who is moving into the district, and I know it's hard to generalize, but I mean, what are you seeing? Is it mainly young people? Is it people coming in from out of town who have jobs? Definitely
a lot of people from Austin. I think the housing in Austin has gone really high, the cost of living there. So a lot of people are looking down the road there at their primos in San Antonio. And so, and we talked about the IUB. I can talk about that in a minute. But I think who's moving into my district is a lot of young families where, you know, as people are wont to do, right? My parents did it. My parents were inner city. My mom went to Fox Tech. My dad went to Linear. As they do a little better, as people do, they move out to the suburbs. And that's where I grew up, you know, in Great Northwest area of District 6. But that's still happening. You see a lot of young families moving out there. A lot of young professionals too. I'm really grateful, and one of the things I've worked for in my district is parks, like quality of life, you know, just improving our parks, making sure you can walk to a park, of course, all the drainage, streets, roads, all the things that I have to take care of. But I do think that that's attractive to a young family or a young professional. Now, the transportation in and out of the district, that's our problem, and that's where I'm focusing, because if you work downtown, you have to drive downtown, right? You can't ride your bike so much, right? I know from different districts you can do that. We have our trail system too. I think we have to look very seriously at our trail system being a form of transportation and making those roads to make. I meant figuratively roads, but also literally those pathways to get people from outer parts of the city to inner parts of the city, or even across town. You know, there's that big via substation that's out in District 10 on the north side, and it gets a lot of criticism for not being used. But if you look at it during the day, a lot of people that work inner west, south side, they work up there, and they're taking the bus and they're using that hub. So it's important that we're not, you know, it's easy to look at, you know, that hub is always empty, nobody ever uses it. But if you go at the right time, you're paying attention, you know, maybe hospitality workers that get out at midnight or 2 o'clock, they're taking, you know, other like Via Link, other kinds of forms of transportation.
Well, you said you were going to talk about the interurban bus.
So the interurban bus, I'm excited about it, and I'll tell you, I know we've talked before, but I was skeptical. Secretary Henry Cisneros came and talked to us at Transportation. We invited him to come talk to us about it, and it's not easy to be skeptical of Henry Cisneros, but I absolutely was, because it's funding, right? Again, talking about the money. I didn't like that San Antonio was picking up over half the bill.
Could you explain what it?
Sure. Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, the interurban bus is a pilot program. It's a bus, literally a bus that will go from San Antonio to Austin and back every 90 minutes. If we're able to get it off the ground, and we'll transport people back and forth. You'll have Wi-Fi. You'll pretty inexpensive ticket to get back and forth. It goes from about 9 in the morning to about 10 o'clock at night. Every 90 minutes or so, and they're pledging you get back. Or you get one way in about an hour. My skepticism came from the funding. I don't like that San Antonio is taking the biggest part of the bill. I think the city of Austin or counties should do more. Also, my number one criticism was that it's going to start. The pickup point in San Antonio is Randolph. I live far west. If you live far south, far west, even inner city, how are you getting to Randolph? And if you're there, why wouldn't you just go the rest of the way, right? I think that's a start. So I'm kind of, you know, I want it all. I want everything beautiful and wrapped up with a bow, but we have to take that baby step and start it. So I'm 100% advocating for it. I'm going to do my best to get it funded. I still think San Antonio is taking up too much of that cost, but I don't want that to be the barrier to get this seed planted. You know, we talked a lot about rail going back and forth, and I mean, I think the general consensus is that that's just never going to happen. I still have hope someday, but right now I think this bus is a good way to show the need, the demand for it, and you know, just see if it works. Let's see. It's a pilot program, right? And it's $1.5 million. That's not, you know, pennies, but relatively speaking for transportation, it's not the most expensive. So we can get those little details worked out, and I think it's a great idea, and I'm excited to see it happen and to ride the bus back and forth to Austin and see how that goes. And, you know, we're going to have to work out some kinks. There's going to be stops along the way, I think, New Braunfels, San Marcos, and thinking about students. You know, it's funny because I was thinking students from San Antonio going to UT, going to San Marcos, but it's the other way around too, right? There's plenty of Austinites or people in those areas right around Austin that are coming to UTSA, maybe St. Mary's. I think it could really change, you know, we're talking about housing. It could change some of those needles too. It could move some of those needles on housing. We don't have to have so much, right? And also the cost for a family. If they live in Austin and their student is going to UTSA, well, housing, even dorm room housing is expensive. Maybe they don't need to do that if this can work out. So I think it can open up a lot of doors, and I'm hopeful. But I go into it with some hesitation. I went into it with some hesitation, and I'm not hesitant anymore, but I do think that we need to understand the issues and then really kind of tweak the problems.
How much of the tab is San Antonio picking up?
About 700,000. And it's, it's close to 800,000 now that I think about it. A little over half, yeah. It's closer to 800.
I mean, is it, to you, does that mean that Austin isn't quite as committed or interested in San Antonio?
I don't know that they're not committed. And I do understand that part of the problem is that nobody's willing to put their dollar down first. And so, I'm not afraid to do that, but I want to make sure it's equitable. I mean, we have, we are the bigger population. It's based on population. San Antonio is the bigger population. But, also our county, I think our county could pick up a little bigger tab. I'd like to see Austin, and they have a couple of counties there. I'd like to see them pick up more of that
and
tab.
The burden would be negotiable.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's again, putting that dollar down first. But I don't want to be I do want to get into it. I'm ready to go. I want to see this bus moving. I just want to make sure that we're paying our equitable part of it. And it is based on population, so I understand that. But they have just as much to gain as we do, I think. And when I say they, I mean Austin, even New Braunfels and San Marcos. So I just want to make sure that we're all, working together and making sure that it's we're all picking up the tab a little more equally, in my opinion.
One of the big things that you emphasized, when you in 2019, when you got elected, was economic development and trying to spur the growth of business in your district. And, I think less than a year after you took office, we had the pandemic hitting it, which was devastating to the economy. In November 2020, voters approved a sales tax for SA Ready to Work, which is, job training, job placement program. What are your impressions so far? We're in the early stages of the implementation. There have been some questions about how effective it's going to be. How many people will be enrolled? Will they meet the goals? Yeah. What are your impressions so far?
I have the same questions. I will ask, and I also need to be patient. I think it's a fantastic idea. I think that the premise is a really good one, and it's all in the execution, right? And I do think that we've been slow going with Ready to Work. I've been very skeptical. I've voiced my concern publicly and privately about it. But the fact of the matter is, we're investing in it, and we need to figure out if we need to adjust here and there. Then we need to do that. I don't think that we should hold on to the original idea. This is the way we're going to do it. Hell or high water, right? We have to adjust as the needs arise. And to your point, right? I mean, we did this. You may recall the sales tax originally was supposed to go towards VIA, and we switched it over to Ready to Work. I still think it's a good idea. I think that we have the right partners. Alamo Workforce and ACCD, everybody involved. I'm a little impatient. I want to see results right now, and that's kind of my mantra, right? I want you listen, you understand, but you act, you do, and it's hard for me not to see this where we thought it would be by now. I do still believe in it, and I think we should be patient and kind of work it out. But at the same time, we need to make tweaks. We need to adjust. There are certain maybe parts of this that didn't work out so much. I mean, in the beginning, I know we talked about a stipend, and I liken it to Project Quest, which I think they're doing incredible work, and we modeled it somewhat after Project Quest, and they're on a small scale. I thought, well, we'll just scale that up. It didn't exactly work that way. So, I mean, like even the stipends, I think we originally started out with a certain amount, and when you're a student going through a pandemic, and initially I thought it was transportation, that we're going to need that transportation back and forth to school. Not so much during the pandemic, they needed it for other things. But when you're a student that's on your own and you're struggling to go to school, it's not just tuition, it's not just transportation, it's, eating, right? Like your rent, your food. So I think those stipends are really important, more important than I really even understood. And so we increased that. I do still believe in it. I think that we can, it can be effective, and it can be something that we can say, look at this subset of people in our city that have done better in life, and now their cycle is, with their families is going to be even better because they went through this program. It's just hard not to see that immediate result. I want to see results right now. So I'll just ask, I also have to be patient, but I think we have to be patient with it. I also think, so one of my passions is foster children. And we can even tie in homelessness to this. Early on, when I ran for office, and you may recall the first time I ran, I lost in 2017.
Very close.
Yeah, very close. Yeah, I remember the paper called it heartbreaking, and I was like, it was heartbreaking. It's exactly how I felt. But in that race, I had a number of people approach me about foster children. And I thought, well, what can the city do, right? So I started asking around those 2 years between when I lost my election, when I won the next time around. And it really is a big pervasive problem in our city, in our country, really. But I started understanding there's a lot of nonprofits out there doing good work. The more I started talking about it, then I get elected, I started asking real questions and bringing it up in our committee meetings. And everybody told me, you can't do anything about that. Your city, that's a state thing, that's not for you. And so I kept pushing and pushing and pushing. Well, now we have our I know I was going to hit something. I told you.
We do it all the time.
Yes,
we have, the pandemic. We have all these housing issues. We have people that are houseless. And guess what? A lot of them are children that have aged out of the foster system. So that's really where I've been focusing, is these children that have never really had an adult guidance, guiding their lives. And now they're left out on the street with a trash bag of their clothes, nowhere to live. They have free state education. They don't know how to access it. And so when I think about all of these things, ready to work, solutions to homelessness, it really is, part of it is putting a face to the title of somebody who's houseless, somebody who maybe start this Ready to Work program. A lot of these kind of ailments that we suffer from in our city and our country, we can start by, looking at this one subset of individuals who really have nobody else in the world. There's a lot of nonprofits out there that are helping in the Through Project and a lot of other projects that are doing incredible work for them. So my thing was housing for them. If we have this housing bond, we're all talking about affordable housing now. Let's build this housing for them that's supportive, like permanent supportive housing, where they can go in and learn some life skills, almost have like a house parent, and maybe an organization that runs it, and they get a better start into the world, because it's a pipeline to being aging out of the foster system is a pipeline to being houseless, to for sex trafficking and for incarceration. So I think we're not going to solve all of those things, but if we can take this subset of individual and category of person and keep them out of those systems, I think it's a start. So that's been one of my passions going forward. But I think, and it goes, I didn't understand how pervasive it is in our city. And we got not just children aging out of the foster care system, but I think those are the ones right now that are in the most kind of urgent need. And then we have CWAP kids, children without placement, who are very, very troubled, and it's difficult to find. We see them in the news, unfortunately, all the time. And that's like 50 kids. I mean, I feel like we can help 50 kids, right? But we haven't. And I say we, I mean, as a society, the city, the county, the state, all can work together. So that's really something I've been kind of shouting from the rooftops. And I'm grateful that we are having those conversations. But again, I want to see that action. And so we're moving towards that with a lot of these programs.
We'll jump around a little bit.
Yeah,
so
sorry, I
we now know
laugh.
that the San Antonio Missions have a new ownership
Yes,
group. So
yeah.
it's Graham Weston, Bruce Hall, many others, including Henry Cisneros, among the new owners. We also know that there's a lot of interest on this group's part of building a downtown baseball stadium at some point, which will probably mean public funding. Is that something you could support?
This is a tough one for me because Nelson Wolff Stadium is in my district.
Right.
And so the first I heard of this, I got kind of squinty eyed and suspicious. And it's upsetting for me. Let me be clear. I think that local ownership is way better than what we had. I don't think that they were really taking care of that stadium and really put us into the position that we're in now. But when I thought about, I've been investing a lot in that area of my district, which is Edgewood, which is a little more inner west side, because I think they have been very much forgotten or neglected. I think, District 5 has a big part of Edgewood and they spend a lot of time there, but my part of Edgewood, not so much, right? So I've spent a lot of time there. We're even going to, building a destination park. A lot of it was to bring investment around that ball field. So now you're talking about moving that ball field and I wasn't too happy about it. But, number one, I represent my whole city and I have to keep that into consideration. What is kind of the greater good for our city? And if it's moving that ball field somewhere where will mean more economic investment, will mean more jobs, will mean better for our city, then I have to consider that. But there was this promise made to this community, right? Just like the AT&T Center. We're going to build this ball field here. This is, way back. And there's going to be all this economic investment. It didn't happen. And so that's my problem is you're gonna kind of lift out not physically, but kind of lift out the organization. And there's this ball field there, and that promise wasn't kept. So I have very frank discussions, with everybody involved, and I from the start support local ownership, and I think it's incredible, and we should have local folks owning the team. But my concern is not so much for where it's going as where it is and what's going to happen if you do move the organization. We'll still have a ball field there. I mean, I think I'm trying to get creative. We have a Edgewood Pony League that plays on these fields that are not great. The lighting's not great. The fields aren't great.
This would be an upgrade for them. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And meanwhile, they do have to bring that ball field up to code, as it were, right up to standards of Major League Baseball. So invest in that ball field, and we'll figure out what happens from there. So I'm excited about kind of the future of the Missions. I'm a big Missions fan. When I was a kid, we used to go to VJ Keefe, and it was the Dodgers. Y'all remember?
Oh yeah.
I got to run after the Puffy Taco 3 times. I caught him every time.
I found a picture recently of like Fernando Valenzuela when he was pitching for the San Antonio Missions.
Really?
He's got the SA cap for just
That's
before
incredible. It's an incredible history that I don't think we bring up enough. We really have had pretty incredible players come through here. It's part of who I am. I'm very San Antonio, and going to VJ Keefe, going to Nelson Wolf, even through the different name changes. I have an old Dodgers cap somewhere, but it's not. But it's hard for me because I still represent this area, and so I'm all for it. I love the team and what they do, and I'm excited about what they could do. But I also need to watch the back of the people that live in Edgewood, right? So I have to figure that out.
So it sounds like you've met with the Elmore Sports Group, which was the previous owner.
No, I've not met with them. No,
really.
Not with the previous owners. No.
Okay, but with the new owners.
The new owners, yeah.
And what did they tell you?
Yeah. Well, basically, what they've said publicly, that they're not saying that they're going to move downtown, right? But we sort of are all talking about it, and they were very, they're very
scouting
respectful,
locations downtown,
right? Yeah,
so,
they're very respectful of kind of my position, and I think that I needed that audience to let them know, look, I'm for the sale of the team to local, but you got to remember that this is my hood right here. I have to have their back. I represent them. They are me, and so I can't just let this, you can't just take it and run. So it was more of an audience, I think, for me.
Right. Did they give you any idea of what kind of improvements they're going to make? Because they'll be there for a while. We don't know how long they'll be at Wolf Stadium, but it'll be a while.
Yeah, they were the improvements to the ball stadium have to be brought up to MLB standards. So it's things like padding and just very physical stuff that stadium just has to be brought up to the standards safety standards. It makes me wonder what was happening. I got up on the dugout one time to sing the 7-inning stretch, and now I'm wondering, was that a good idea?
Yeah. Oh my God.
But no, we went, of course, number one, we should make it safe for our players now. And that's really what they know that they have to do as new owners. Any new owner would have to do that.
You're the chair of the City Council's Public Safety Committee, and we had an incident in San Antonio that got a lot of attention nearly 2 months ago. The 17-year-old Erik Cantu was shot by a police officer in a McDonald's parking lot, and I think there was pretty much uniform sentiment that the police officer just did everything wrong in that case. I think even people who are very supportive of police would say, this was just not the right way to handle it. And I guess I wondered from your perspective as the chair of the committee, did you see this as just the actions of one rogue officer, or were there any alarm bells for you as far as, because he was a new officer, he had just come out of the academy a few months before. Any concerns about whether this incident told us something more about any deficiencies in the training process? I
don't have any concern that that's a deficiency in training or in our force, generally speaking. I think he was one individual who made extremely bad choices. I can't watch those videos. It's very difficult for me to watch that kind of violence. So I didn't watch it, but I'll tell you this. When I first became chair of public safety, I asked to do like a mini training with him. So we as a committee went to the police academy and we did a mini training. And I was, even though it's like you're kind of role playing, I was terrified. It was these role playing where you have a person that's in a truck that's getting agitated, and it's even in a safe, where I know I'm safe environment. I was scared when I heard about this. That's the first thing I thought, is his own sort of he didn't take out of the training what he should have, like the kind of removing your fear. We have to remember that too. I mean, that they're always, I can't imagine that job day in, day out, but not to make any excuse for this fellow at all. I think he made very poor choices in this whole scenario. And everybody, like you said, agrees with that. But I don't think it's a deficiency in training. I think it was a deficiency in his choice. If he was scared, if he was intimidated, if he was angry, if he was, I know that he tried to, I think the story was he tried to pull the young man over the night before. Was it like being vindictive? I don't know. I can't pretend to know what was going on through his brain, but I don't think it's a systemic issue in our police department, not at all. And, thank God that sort of thing doesn't happen a lot, but I think we have to look at that as a whole too, right? With 2,000 plus officers, that was one guy who made pretty bad choices.
What's your feedback on how San Antonio Police Department, how they actually handled it in the aftermath of it? So releasing the video and all that.
I think I wouldn't have changed a thing. I mean, I think that they did the right thing. I want to say we have a 30-day policy now, or the chief has a 30-day policy of releasing. He did it right away. The officer was let go right away because he was still on probation. I don't think that there's anything they could have done differently. I mean, they did their due diligence, figured out what he did, how he did it wrong, and then took action. And now he's dealing with the former officers dealing with the legal system.
Earlier, on another issue, Gilbert asked you if you were mayor.
Mm-hmm.
That's our son.
I know you don't deal in hypotheticals, but we do deal in hypotheticals.
So not in 2023, but down the line, can you see yourself in that role?
I get asked that question a lot. It's been coming up a lot, especially in the last year. You recall, I think the last time you and I talked, I had the choice whether to run for state rep, and at the time,
how does it see that she was vacant?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I just had that election, and I went to Josie Garcia. She's District 124, the new representative. I went to her election, and the election night party. I'm really grateful and proud of her, but didn't regret it. Not one time. I love this city. I want to be in this city. I don't want to be in a different city, so it's hard for me. It was a tough decision though. I mean, I had people calling me saying, hey, this is a higher office. It's more power. It's more this, more that. And after a number of times hearing that, I was kind of dejected. And I thought, if that's what you think I want, then you don't know me, right? I've kind of actually cut people out of my cabinet for that reason, because that's not what I'm about. It's really acting, getting things done in my community. So to ask me, do you want what I call the big chair, to sit in the big chair? Maybe. I mean, I don't know where the road may lead me, but I do really love this city. I think that I am San Antonio. I feel very much connected to every aspect of it. District 6 is like a microcosm of the entire city. So to consider that would be, for me, just kind of scaling up, right? We have anything that you find in the city we have in my district. It's Edgewood all the way over to Alamo Ranch. It's Westover Hills. We have the mini medical center. We have, predominantly African-American communities in our community workers area. We're predominantly Latino. I think we are very much this city. And so it's just sort of scaling up. I would never close the door to that. I am still very much focused on getting my job done here, which is why it's been difficult with all the distractions. I sort of joke around. I got elected, and about 8 months later, we had pandemic. We had George Floyd was killed. We had the winter storm. We had the hottest summer ever. These 2 incidents with my colleagues. It's never been normal for me. So,
maybe it never is.
Yeah, no, maybe not.
So 2025, right?
Yeah.
That's 2025.
That's what I think would be.
But you hear trial by fire, right?
Yeah.
At the beginning, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know what I was getting into. Am I the right person for it? But I very much believe, I was put there for a reason. There's a reason that I'm here and that we're going through all of this. And it's sometimes it's the fire stiffen, it gets you stronger, right?
Well, Councilwoman Cabello Havrda, thank you so much for.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
I'm
not in charge here, but yes.
Alamo Ranch,
Yeah.
I've lived there pretty much my whole
Oh,
life.
okay.
A question about the traffic there.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
The specifically Culebra 1604, I think that area
It's a nightmare.
Loaded
Yeah.
with so many people.
Yeah.
Do you guys have conversations about the traffic there? Because it's
Yes.
from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. It's a 45-minute drive just to go maybe a mile.
Absolutely. So I grew up in, do you know where Great Northwest is, like Silver Creek?
I went to Warren High School.
Oh, did you really? Okay, cool. I would have gone to Warren, but I'm older than you, so I went to Taft.
Taft is right there.
Yeah, it's 471. So when I used to drive to Taft from my house, it's 1604 in Culebra was a little four-way stop. I mean, there was no highway, there was no, nothing out there. And so I've seen that growth, over my lifetime, and it's explosion. So what I was saying about it's not just my district, it's right outside, because I have just Alamo Ranch just outside 1604, but then there's the whole, which I think y'all are going to make yourselves a municipality at some point. You're going to be your own little municipality.
My parents live right there on Lone Star.
Okay, yeah.
I experience that all the time.
So I have a lot of conversations about that. When I talk about Culebra Road, it is District 1, but it's all the way out to 471. I have to consider, because my district is just that little part of Alamo Ranch, but it goes just the road. It's just Culebra/471. It circles around Taft, my high school, goes straight up, and then it's Government Canyon. Yeah. So it's not either side of it. It's just the road. So we can keep Government Canyon. I also boast that we have the only district with dinosaur tracks. So there's that. And the highest point in Bexar County is Government Canyon. So I have a wealth of useless information. But that is a big conversation for us, and because that particular area where you're talking about, and then they put a movie theater out there, we have all of that economic growth, which is fantastic, but it's hard when you can't get in and out of there. So I think y'all have the hardest, though, because you have to get to that intersection before you even get where you're going.
Kind of find nooks and crannies around.
Yeah. And so I think one of the things that I'm working, Via Link has a pilot program right around there. We targeted it right around there so that we could see if people would use it. I don't think it's gotten out that much. It's like I don't know if you've heard of Via Link. It's like an Uber for Via. But people, we're used to using our cars. So I think it's a mindset change. I think part of it is kind of making people understand you have these different options. But it's going to be slow. It's slow mindset change, I think. But for the bigger issue, I think what we need to do is we need to figure out how to, I hate this, I hate saying this, but we do need to figure out how to widen that road, because we do need more lanes. I know I sound like TxDOT, but I would rather have, pedestrian and bike and us figure all of that out. But I think in the short term, we need just more space. We just physically need more space. And then when you look at what happened on Bandera in 1604 and all that, it's kind of confusing.
My business is in District 7, and I know that intersection right there.
Okay. So do you find that that's better than it was?
It was very confusing at first, but I don't know if it's the algorithm of the lights that it's very efficient.
Okay.
But you think you're coming to a red light, and I don't know if that's a function of the road or the algorithm of the lights being more finely tuned.
Well, that's good feedback, though. I mean, I do think it's confusing. I'm always a little more like.
But I live there, I work there, so it's just repetition, obviously. You deal with it, but would I say it's more or less efficient? I think it's the lights that are. I get to there, and I find that I'm not waiting that long to get across.
Well, that's interesting. I wonder if I could talk to you about this offline, though, because I want to hear more feedback from you about that. I think if it's the lights, I mean, that's something that's not. Are you talking about the timing of the lights?
So, for example, not to get too granular here, but like on right behind the Target there on Alamo Ranch, there's that light that cuts across. Yeah. To cut across to the Walmart side where the trails are, the light is maybe like 10, 15 seconds. And then the Culebra, those are time to get the Culebra
that's a good point.
Going this way. So like it gets backed up all over that place.
That's a really good point. I mean, maybe that's an easier fix. It's a great idea. You should consider running for District 6 when I'm on.
After you.
After I'm
Thank you so much.
We need to do that.
Thank you so much for joining the podcast. Hope you have a great Thanksgiving.
You too.
And we really appreciate it.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you. Have a happy holiday season.
And for everyone listening in, hope you all are doing well and have a happy Thanksgiving. And we'll be back with you next week. Take care.